Welcome to the Clean Earth Living podcast. I'm Tori, your guide to sustainability and living clean on a changing planet. Are you ready to decode climate change, ditch eco-anxiety, and make a real difference? Whether you're here to take action in your life or explore the bigger picture, we're making it fun, we're making it relatable, and totally doable. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Clean Earth Living podcast. Happy 2025. I cannot believe it's already 2025. It has been a pretty chill couple weeks. We have been celebrating Christmas and New Year's and making some New Year's resolutions. So let's get straight to it. We'll go through my New Year's resolutions, some hopeful climate news, a bit of an announcement about the Clean Earth Living brand, and then we'll get straight into our topic, which is the 8 basics to implement today of sustainable living. So, starting with New Year's resolutions, I know a lot of people, have mixed feelings about these. Either you like them, you don't, you create them, you don't, you stick to them, or you don't. But mine this year are all about sustainability and sustainable living, and specifically also with the intersection of spending money, because we could always save a little more money, spend a little less money on frivolous things when you look back and you're like, where did all that money go? So my New Year's resolutions this year are to not buy a lot of things. And the things that I am not buying are Ziploc bags, dryer sheets, new clothes. So I'm doing all secondhand clothing, storage bins or any type of organization, plastic things, gift wrap, and mani-pedis. So if you follow me on TikTok, tiktok.com/cleanearthliving, I go into a lot of detail on how I'm doing this, how I'm only shopping secondhand. What does that mean? Like, obviously, I'll still buy new, socks and underwear. I'm not trying to, investigate the used underwear market, but most things I'm buying totally new. Gift wrap, how to repurpose things around your house as gift wrap. How to use not single-use plastic in place of Ziploc bags. And we'll get into exactly how much single-use plastic is used and thrown away every year. And it's a crazy number. But yeah, that's my New Year's resolution. So again, things I'm not buying: Ziploc bags, dryer sheets, new clothes, storage bins, gift wrap, and mani-pedis. And also I want to think more strategically about car driving. I live out in the suburbs, and driving into Austin, I feel like I do it almost every day. And I was literally in Austin yesterday for a workout class. Then I came straight home. Then I went to Austin today for a doctor's appointment and came straight home. And I was like, I could have done the workout class and then gone to the doctor's appointment. I could have stacked this better and saved myself $5 in tolls, $8 in gas, and just more, been better for the planet. And so public transportation it doesn't exist where I live, unfortunately, but I think there's ways to be more strategic about driving. So I want to do that more this year also. That just saves time and saves money and saves energy. So much of sustainability is also just better for you. You're saving money, you're saving time, you're saving resources. It's literally how our grandparents used to live. You're just being mindful of your resources. So that's my resolutions, and I'm excited to hear what your sustainability related New Year's resolutions are. Please send them to me. I would love to go over them and give people more ideas. I feel like January as a whole month is really when we make New Year's resolutions. So you don't have to have them already established or bust, on January 30th. I think there's still plenty of time to establish that. So moving on to hopeful climate news, I saw this the other day, and it's actually old. I think it came out in May, but it's new to all of us. Guarantee you weren't aware of this. But the world's largest waste-to-energy facility will power more than 100,000 homes. So that is the headline. This is from CNN on May 17th, 2024. So quite a bit of time ago, but still very going, still kicking, and it's still new. So super interesting, because waste is technically kind of sort of a renewable resource. It's not a fossil fuel. It's definitely made up of things that are made from fossil fuels like plastic, but it is taking a huge issue, which is the land use and the chemical leakings from landfills, and shifting that to something that can be useful. And so that's really cool. I really like this. And so this is in Dubai, and about 45% of Dubai's total waste comes to this new facility, where trash is turned into electricity for over 100,000 homes. And so they have basically these like big filters to strip out harmful elements such as heavy metals, sulfur components, and they trap particles that are taken away for disposal. So it's really good in that way, but not all pollutants are taken out. So carbon dioxide is still released into the air. Like from this situation, there still is greenhouse gas emissions, but a huge issue of climate change adaptation is we're going to run out of fossil fuels, and we're going to have to go through more invasive methods such as fracking and offshore drilling to acquire more fossil fuels. So even if we are not completely eliminating their methods for creating energy, that is still a step in the right direction. And it's really cool because this process is highly efficient. And so of the 5,500 tons of waste that the facility receives every day, think about that. Landfills that I was actually just reading, unrelated to this, is that landfills produce a lot of methane because that's the gas that occurs when things are decomposing and breaking down. And landfills contribute 7% of global methane emissions. And so while this is burning carbon dioxide, it is eliminating these methane emissions. And methane actually has a higher, I forget the term, I learned it in grad school, but it has a higher potency basically of how much warming it sends back down to the earth. And so although methane is less prevalent and it is more potent when it is, and so eliminating it is really should be top of mind, and that's what they're doing. So that's great. This is really cool. I love this creativity over here using trash to make energy, and I'll post the article link. But that is my hopeful climate news of the day, and I thought it was just so cool. Last piece of info before we get into the topic is that I'm launching an online course. I'm launching a Udemy course on February 1st, which is in 29 days. I have a long way to go. I've been working so hard on it, and I have the outline and I have all the facts. I just got to make it pretty and record it and do all those things. But I'm launching it on February 1st. And it's a really similar concept and format to today's podcast episode. So today's podcast episode is the absolute very high level highlight reel of the course. And that basically is like the course is designed. Okay, if you're going to sit down for 3 hours at your computer, you can watch this course for an hour and a half and then do an hour and a half worth of like homework and legwork. You can reduce your household carbon footprint by over 50% in 3 hours if you just know what to do. And so this podcast is a few of those kind of homework pieces that you can go do. And so the way the course works is it's a lot of the science behind, household greenhouse emissions, the carbon footprint of different types of foods that we eat, the carbon footprint of landfill waste, but then also things that you can tactically do to eliminate those in your own home. And these aren't big ticket things. So let's get into it. Okay. As I was pulling info for this episode, I did start to get a little bit of compassion fatigue-y, and I started to get a little panicky, but I think there's so much we can do, and it's going to be great. So the United States is responsible for 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions, despite only making up 4.22% of Earth's population. So basically, this tells us that people in the United States are taking up way more than their fair share of greenhouse gas emissions and using about 4 times what the rest of people on Earth are using on a person-to-person basis. And that is, like, that makes sense, right? Like, you think of, like, the lifestyle of people in the United States versus Ghana. It's pretty different. But it means that as people who are more affluent in a more affluent country, we have a lot of work to do to be mindful of our carbon emission or carbon footprint and do the work to reduce that. And so the goal of today's episode and of my course that's launching on February 1st is things you can do right now, today, to reduce your own carbon footprint. So there are much larger scale, like big decisions that we could be making, like buying a smaller house, like choosing to have 1 or 2 kids instead of 3 or 4 kids, choosing to purchase an electric vehicle. These are huge decisions. Like literally deciding how many kids to have, that's just not in the scope of today's episode. Telling you to put your house on the market and go buy a smaller house or more energy efficient house, that is not in the scope of today's episode. Would those things be huge ways to reduce your carbon footprint? Yes. But right now we're starting small with things that you can sit down at your computer and get done today that will reduce the carbon footprint of your home and your family. And so I just wanted to put that out there. Like, you're probably thinking like, well, electric vehicles are a huge way. Buying solar panels are a huge way. Sure. That's not reasonable to ask someone to go sit down and do today. And we're thinking about baby steps at this point. So I wanted to get that out of the way. But according to the United Nations, to preserve a livable climate, the average annual carbon emission per person needs to drop from 6.3 tons, where it is today, to 2.1 tons. So by 2/3 by 2030, which is in 5 years. And so what I have in my course, which is a sample of what it is here, will reduce your household's carbon footprint by about 50%. But we need to pull in some of those big ticket items to get it down to 2/3. But right now we're starting with 50%. I think that's pretty dang good. So there are 8 different topics/tips, and I will run through them quickly so that you don't have to be sitting here bored all day. But the very first one is switching to renewable energy. And by this, I do not mean installing solar panels on your roof, installing a wind farm in your backyard. That's not what I'm talking about. You can contact your energy provider right now to inquire about renewable energy options. Or you can switch to a renewable energy provider altogether. And so I did this. I live in a small municipality outside Austin. We have a provider called Bluebonnet Energy. It's like a random small electric co-op is what it's called. And they have a green energy option, which basically offsets what my household uses. And then they have to go purchase that amount in renewable energy. And so what this does is it drives up the demand for renewable energy and it offsets my personal use. So I know that my energy provider, they have to buy, I'm making this up, 8 million units of electricity, but 20,000 of those units they have to buy from a renewable source. So the energy that they are acquiring, slightly larger percentage of it now because I use the green energy option, has to be from a renewable source. And all of these energy companies and energy providers have data analysts and have data scientists that are always forecasting energy needs and different type of energy needs. And the more of us that are requesting, or not, it's not a request, it's an option, that are using purchased clean energy from our providers, the more that they will forecast that they need to buy in the future. And that goes downstream to people who are creating energy sources. And so it really is this signaling to the world and to the energy sector that there is a higher demand for renewable energy, but also it literally takes the energy that your home uses and ensures that it is being acquired by your energy provider through renewable sources only. This costs about 4% more for me personally. I don't know why it costs more. I'm sure they just like to mark up anything they can because it's, what's it called? Capitalism. But I'm sure every energy provider will be different. I try to challenge myself to use slightly less energy to offset that 4%. And energy is a pretty cheap commodity anyways. So I really don't feel it or see it to any great extent. But just want to throw out there that according to the EPA, typical annual carbon emissions are 8,744 pounds per household of electricity on your electricity bill. And there are 127 million households in America. So 8,700 pounds times 127 million homes, that is so much energy that can be converted from coal energy or fossil fuel powered energy, whatever it is, to renewable energy if individual Americans just pick up the phone or go to their energy provider website and make that switch. So it's so easy. And like I said, you can sit down at your computer and do that today, right now. And that is the absolute largest, other than potentially transportation if you drive a lot, that is the largest source of carbon emissions for the average American. That can just be, bam, switched off. So that's amazing. Secondly, reduce, reuse, refuse. I heard a few years ago, there's the term reduce, reuse, recycle, an environmentalist saying it should really be reduce, reuse, repair, refuse. And so tip number 2 is specifically reduce, reuse, refuse. But this emphasizes the importance of consuming less overall and specifically consuming less net new products. And so before making a purchase, you can ask yourself, like, do I really need this? Or can I borrow, rent, or buy secondhand instead? Um, my group of girlfriends in Austin has done a really excellent job of encouraging each other to ask, hey, does anyone have a leaf blower? Like, my oak tree leaves are falling. Hey, I'm going to a gala. Does anyone have a black tie dress for like a winter vibe? Like, I really, really would encourage you to reach out to your friend group for these things instead of buying net new, instead of even having to go rent, because that's still expensive, or even buying secondhand. Like, if it's already in your friend's closet and all you have to do is use it, wash it, and give it back, that is free for you. That is absolutely no net additional resources being used other than driving to your friend's house to get it and washing it after. But that's the bare minimum of what would happen anyways. And so regardless of what it is, if it's clothing, if it's things for household repairs, those are the only 2 examples I can think of. Renting or borrowing or buying secondhand first before you just go on Amazon and order it is going to be your best bet. According to a study from the Department of Urban Engineering at the University of Tokyo, exploring secondhand clothing consumption patterns and reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, that's what the name of the study is called. Sorry, that's so long. Secondhand clothing uses 61% less greenhouse gas emissions than regular clothes by weight. So 1 ton of secondhand clothing versus 1 ton of net new clothing uses 61% less greenhouse gas emissions. And because basically only the only greenhouse gas emissions left are transportation and packaging of the goods. And so that is a huge way. Think of all the things you buy, all the things that come to your door, all the packages, all the Amazon packages, all the Target packages. If all of that could be eliminated by 61% by phoning a friend, by going to a thrift store instead, that's a huge impact. And I've said it once and I'll say it a million times. This aspect of sustainable living is cheaper. I think people think, oh, it's so, you have to be like a bougie hippie that only goes to Whole Foods and buys organic everything to be. No, it's literally cheaper. Okay. So there's so many ways, regardless if you don't give a rip about sustainability, this advice is really handy for most people in America who don't have millions of dollars to just fling at any dress for any gala that you need, any leaf blower that you need, any whatever fill in the blank thing that you need. You can buy it secondhand. You can borrow it from a friend. And one more thing I'll say on this, because it would be so non-Tori for me to not mention this, Facebook Marketplace. Okay. Facebook Marketplace is my favorite thing in the whole world. I'm meeting a girl today to buy a walking pad from her for $80 cash that I got Christmas money for my grandma for Christmas. I love Facebook Marketplace, and I cannot say enough good things about selling and buying on Facebook Marketplace or giving away things for free on Buy Nothing Facebook groups. But this is such an amazing resource and goes hand in hand with this tip to reduce, reuse, and refuse, because so many things that you need, it can be bought cheaper, it can be bought locally in your own neighborhood and secondhand from Facebook Marketplace. So I would highly encourage you to check that out. Our third tip is one that you're gonna not like, and I'm really sorry, but it's okay. And like, just hear me out and we'll get into how you can do this and you won't even feel it and you won't even notice it. Okay. Embrace plant-based meals. If you're someone like me who loves, oh my God, we had ribeyes last night. My brother-in-law is the best chef. Like, he comes to our house and cooks us meals. It's amazing. He brought over these fat ribeyes and I was like, oh my God. And it was like the best thing I've ever tasted. But guess what? Meat, especially meat from ruminants, which is cows, is horrible for the environment. So according to a study from the University of Copenhagen, and this is regarding land use, but we'll get into water use and greenhouse gas emissions also, for each gram of beef protein consumed in the human diet, beef production requires 42 times more land use, 2 times more water use, and it generates 3 times more greenhouse gas emissions than plant foods. That beef requires 42 times more land use. Not like, oh, 30% more. No, 42 times more. That's 4,200%. Not 42%, 4,200%. That's bananas. That's crazy. That should shake you. We could produce 42 times more food if we didn't have beef. And so, what's a girl to do? Because I really think it is irresponsible. I think it is unrealistic and just silly and dumb to ask people in the world to go vegetarian or vegan. I think it's a waste of energy because no one's going to do it and they're going to just alienate you. And there's so many ways to persuade people and to get them to see your side, but just forcing something on them that they don't want to do at the outset is never going to be it. So what do? We encourage people to just sprinkle in a little more plant-based meals into your diet. Maybe one dinner this week of your 7 dinners you have plant-based. Just one. Just for the sake of listening to this episode, one time in your life, once ever, make a plant-based meal. And so we're going to break this down, but I want you to first understand what about plant-based scares you. For me, it's protein. I love protein, and that's why I love steak. I love chicken. I love pork. I love diversifying the types of meats I have. I eat meat at every meal. I am trying to grow my muscle mass. I want my body to be in the perfect state to have a baby one day. I want to be physically fit. I am obsessed with protein and getting high quality protein and bioavailable protein, and I get it. Plant-based is more hard for that. But whatever it is, say you just like the flavor of meat, or say the thought of tofu like gives you the ick. First, identify what it is that is setting you back from understanding or from looking into plant-based, and then say it's protein, like for me. Google high protein plant-based meals. There are a lot of higher protein plant-based meals if you combine the right ingredients at the right amount. And so for me, what this would look like is Googling high protein plant-based meals, finding one that I like, and trying it out this week. And that's it. Can you do that? I think that you can, and I would love to hear your experience after you do. And so moving on, just to, close this with a couple more statistics. One study finds that the difference between water inputs for animal protein versus plant protein is a factor of 26. And so we established a couple minutes ago that animal protein needs 42 times more land use, but now we're establishing that it needs 26 times more water. Even when intensive irrigation is needed for certain plant-based protein, because some plants like almonds, I'm sure you hear like, oh, but almonds aren't even good for the earth. Okay. Even when intensive irrigation is needed for plant-based protein, animal production requires 4.4 times as much water. So it still takes more water. Not 26 times more water, only 4.4 times more water. But even for intense irrigation need plants such as almonds, the plant-based option is still going to be better for water use. And then lastly, to round it out with greenhouse gas use and the impact of animal-based protein, another study estimates that meat and dairy production processes account for 80% of all greenhouse gases from the food sector and 25% of total greenhouse gases. So all the greenhouse gases in the world, and sorry, it's 24%, not 25. All the greenhouse gases for transportation, for industry, for heating our homes, for food, for everything, 24% of them is for animal protein. That's crazy. Like animal protein compared to all the flights that fly in the world, to all the cars that drive in the world, compared to everything, 24% of all global greenhouse gas emissions is from creating animal protein. That is so much, which means it's such low-hanging fruit to just curve a little bit. So please let me know what plant-based meals you try. Maybe I can make a list of some that are like, plant-based meals that people who don't really want to be eating plant-based but are trying to do it for the environment like that aren't like so vegetarian vibes. I don't know if that's a thing. Our fourth tip is walking, biking, or taking public transit. So according to the United Nations, shifting from cars to public transportation can reduce up to 2.2 tons of carbon emissions annually per individual. And remember what I said up top, individuals need to go from 6 tons to 2 tons by 2030. So this is 1/3 of that, bam, right there, or half of that right there, 2.2 tons carbon emissions if you just get rid of your car, which I mean, that's kind of crazy, but that's an extreme example. If you do need to travel by car, carpooling can result in 1 ton emission reduction. So that's a quarter of the way there. And living car-free can reduce your total annual carbon footprint by 3.6 tons. So that would basically get you all the way from the 6 to the 2 that United Nations recommends that we all need to be at by 2030. So as far as an actionable little piece of homework for you this week, just put in Google Maps your route to work, okay? And just see, is there a public transit option, yes or no? Because if 1,000 people listen to this podcast and do the homework for real, and only 200 people of the 1,000 end up seeing like, oh wait, there actually is a train I could take, there is a bus I could take. It might not apply to you, you might be one of the 800, but what if you're one of the 200? What if it does apply to you? What if there is a route that, might take a little longer, but you can work on your laptop while you're doing it? So just see some common routes that you're taking. Is there a public transport option? And I would encourage you to take that, especially if you live, I know by the time my time in New York City was ending, when I lived in New York City, I was like, making a little more money, and I was addicted to hailing a cab instead of getting my butt down in the subway. Maybe you just switch that a little bit. It's not because it's for people who can't afford taxis. No, it's for people who want to spend substantially less carbon emissions to get from point A to point B. So I would highly encourage that. Tip 5 is reducing food waste. Okay, this is crazy. 38% of all food goes unsold or uneaten. 38%. That is almost half of food goes unsold or uneaten, and 51.7% of waste comes from the food industry. So of all the waste that gets wasted everywhere, 51% of it is food, which is crazy. But that means that so much of the waste that is being wasted in this country and in this world can be composted, can be rerouted, and can be mitigated. Because the thing about waste is that it's just wasteful. I know that sounds like so dumb to say, just stick with me. There are certain greenhouse gas emissions, water use, land use. It's necessary. We need to drive to work. We need to eat protein. We need to wear clothes on our backs. But food waste is just wasteful. It doesn't serve any purpose. It's just inefficiency that we can completely solve for. And so there's 2 main things that you can do as an individual. One is meal plan better, such that you either don't have leftovers or you actually eat the leftovers in time before they go bad. I have heard people in my life say like, oh, I don't eat leftovers. And that drives me crazy. And I can think of a few people, and if you're listening, please know that I still love you. But what do you mean you don't eat leftovers? You're not better than that. Sorry, you're not better than that. Eat the leftovers, or use your little brain to make a meal, calculate out how much you're going to eat such that you don't have leftovers. It's hard in that it's a change in mindset, but it's not hard to actually execute if you put your mind to it. Okay. And then secondly is what to do when you do have food waste and food scraps. So you can compost it. If you don't want to have a backyard composter, you can put it in a paper bag in your freezer until it gets full, and then you can drop it off at a local compost site. If you Google it, put in your zip code, there are many resources to tell you exactly where to find a local compost site. Or you can use your food scraps creatively. I use my food scraps from bones, like from short ribs or from cooking a whole chicken, and I save that for bone broth. I also save my veggie scraps to put in that bone broth. I make like a big old pot of like veggie bone broth of like literally everything I've saved, like whenever the Ziploc bags get full, the Stasher gallon Ziploc bags, like the reusable ones. So you could do that. So that you're like getting the most juice for the squeeze, So really meal planning and saving scraps for composting are 2 of the huge ways that you can mitigate this massive food waste problem that is just so egregious. And I just find it so gross because it's just wasteful. Like, it's not for a purpose. It's just waste. And I hate that. Tip number 6 is reducing single-use plastics. I didn't realize this. I knew it was bad. But according to Plastic Oceans International, we're producing over 380 million tons of plastic every year. And some reports indicate that up to 50% of that is for single-use purposes. Okay. So 380 million tons. I don't know why I'm holding this. What is this painter's tape bucket? Sorry, I'll put it down. 380 million tons of plastic every year. 50% of that is single use. So first of all, imagine if we could just divide that in half, because we won't be using single-use plastic anymore. Second of all, we need to address the total number, but this tip is specifically about single-use plastic. And so one of my New Year's resolutions that I talked about at the top was no longer buying Ziploc bags. That's a huge one, because if you're someone who makes lunch for your kids, say you put a sandwich in your kid's lunch every day, think about how many Ziploc bags that is. That's just a way of life. It's just how we do it. And that is not a necessary way of life. You can use Tupperware, even plastic Tupperware. I still hate it. Get glass or stainless, whatever. But changing at this point, like I said, this is all about baby steps. If you can just change from single-use plastic to reusable, I don't care how you do it. For now. We'll get into it later. But having things like reusable bags at the grocery store, reusable produce bags. I made a TikTok the other day where I showed my reusable produce bags. They have the weight on them so they can subtract the weight when you check out at the grocery store. Refillable containers. Purchasing household cleaning products that do not come in plastic. So my dishwasher tabs and my laundry tabs come in a paper bag. And then you recycle the paper bag. So understanding ways in your life that you are using single-use plastic when you don't need to be, and just being mindful of that and starting to eliminate that is going to be really huge. Okay, this is our last real tip before I get into like our fake tip that I almost didn't put in because it makes me cringe, but I think it's still important to talk about. Okay, this is our last real tip for real, and it is conserving water. And this is crazy. And my sister and brother-in-law experienced this when they had a I want to say $2,000 water bill or something. But according to the EPA, the average household leaks can account for 10,000 gallons of water wasted every year. So when there is a leak in your household, it can accidentally spend 10,000 gallons of water on an annualized basis. That is what causes things like accidental $200 or $800 or whatever, not $200, $2,000 or $800 water bill. And you're like, oh my God, there must be a mistake. And they come to your house and they say, oh no, you have a leaking toilet. Sorry. That is crazy. 10% of homes have leaks that waste 90 gallons or more per day of water. And so for me to say like, oh yeah, if you have a leak, it costs this much. And then you say, well, yeah, but that's if you have a leak. Okay, well, 10% of homes do. Okay. So you could easily, it's not like 0.1% or even 3%, 10%. That's pretty material amount. Okay. So common types of leaks found in the home are worn toilet flappers, dripping faucets, and other leaking valves. And so if you just want to check to make sure that you don't have any leaks, there are so many resources for checking. I am not a plumber, nor am I an expert in anything water appliances, so I'm not going to go through that right now. But checking for leaks is a huge way to ensure that you're not wasting water in your home. And then your homework for this section is to try out the quick cycle on your washer and dishwasher and see what you think. Maybe it's crap. Maybe you have an old dishwasher, or your kids have stinky soccer clothes and it's just not going to cut it. But maybe it works. So try it. Like I've said in all of these tips, I'm not asking you to commit to anything. I'm not asking you to change your lifestyle. Just put the quick cycle on the dishwasher and be a little crazy, okay? Just see what happens. Maybe it'll be great. And then from then on out, you can be saving water and saving energy. And how easy is that? Okay? So I encourage you from this section to just try out those two things. Check for any leaks. Test out the quick function on your washing machine. Test out the quick function on your dishwasher. Okay. Now our last tip. Continue to educate yourself and others. This one is silly billy because it's not real. It's not like a real tactical thing. It's not tactical. Sorry, that's probably the word I meant to say. But my whole philosophy is that we can't be doing any of this in a vacuum. Because you saving your own household a ton of carbon a year is absolutely a drop in the bucket in the scheme of things. But all of our friends telling all of our friends telling all of our friends telling all of our friends, all of a sudden that's the whole world. Okay? So it really is a ripple effect. And there is so much more for us to do to educate ourselves, listening to other, keeping to listen. Have you subscribed to this podcast? First of all, listening to other podcasts. I'm sure there's others, documentaries, articles, textbooks. There's so many ways to educate yourself, and there's so many ways to pass that information on to other people. And that's really how we take all of this information that's in this podcast or that is anywhere else, and we magnify it so that we can really see the effects of all of these little bitty tips and the ripple effects of them happening all across America and all across the globe. So that really is the importance of taking small and consistent steps towards a more sustainable lifestyle. It is you doing it and then everyone around you doing it too. Okay, so that is all I have for you today. And I really think, as far as the sustainable living tip that I try to do in every episode, we did that at the top with sustainability resolutions. So set some resolutions this year, whatever they may be, but set a sustainable living resolution or a clean living resolution and let me know what that is. And thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the Clean Earth Living podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend who wants to make a difference. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Clean Earth Living for more tips and updates. Visit our website at www.cleanearthliving.com or email us at info@cleanearthliving.com with your questions, topic ideas, or anything in between. Let's keep living clean and making a big impact. See you next time.